We've got a great question today. It has to do with fruits and preserving fruits, specifically drying them in the 18th century. Thanks for joining us today. So here's the main question. Is from Gail Christensen. She says, "What a lovely recipe. Speaking of peaches, have you ever come across recipes or preservation methods for drying fruits and vegetables? I mean, obviously they dried corn and other grains for long-term storage, but what about things like green beans, potatoes, sweet potatoes, pumpkin, and other winter squash, snap peas, and okra? Did they dry fruits like apple slices or small berries like blackberries and raspberries to use in pies and puddings when fresh fruits were not in season?" Excellent question, but there's a lot there, isn't there? Let's kind of narrow in specifically on fruits. I'm not sure exactly what to say about some of these other things like potatoes. I don't know how you can dry potatoes, possibly sweet potatoes. Normally, though, those things were stored up in their standard to use form. I mean, actually, potatoes are great for long-term storage if you just store them in sawdust or whatnot. And some of these other things like the winter squash, those definitely were dried by, say, the Native Americans. But that's a little bit harder to get your hands on exactly how they did that because the Native Americans didn't necessarily write that down, so that you have to find that in journals written by, say, Europeans about what the Native Americans were doing. But let's concentrate on what the Europeans or the people coming into North America were doing. Here is a piece of a diary. This is Mary Cooper. She's in Long Island in the mid-18th century. This is a part from her 1768 diary. It's October, let's start here on the 10th. This is Monday. She writes, "A fine clear morning, a new moon, sent for sugar and molasses to George Weeks." And then the next day, she says, "Tuesday, like for rain, we're much hurried drying apples. Extremely high winds this night, but no rain. The next day, fine clear day, much hurried drying apples." And then finally on Thursday, she writes, "We finished drying apples and making sweetmeats. Little or no company here." Now, I started off on Monday where she sends for sugar and molasses for a reason. Most of the recipes that you see talking about drying fruits and vegetables, the recipes, actually have you boil these fruits in sugar and then drying them out. That seems to be a very, very common way of doing it. And they may have been doing that very thing right here in 1768, drying them after sort of boiling them in sugar and then drying them out in the oven. But not all the recipes are like that. John Knott in 1723 has a drying apples recipe that says, "First preserve them with their stalks on, then wash and wipe them and lay them out on tin plates, and then let them over the stove or in a gentle oven. Turn them as you see often." There's another recipe where they actually talk about drying them whole, but putting a bodkin through the center of the apple. So a bodkin, sort of like a very large needle. So you can imagine that it was sort of like putting a skewer in meat and cooking it. That bodkin would transfer the heat down into the center of the apple, which I could see would be a problem with drying them in this manner. Here's another method that's a little bit different than either the sugar method or just drying them out sort of without anything else. This one says, to dry apples, first boil them in new ale wort on a slow fire for a quarter of an hour, then take them out and press them flat and dry them in your oven or your stove. Put them in papers in a box and they'll keep all year. So there's several different methods of drying them out. But it turns out that apples by themselves don't actually need that much preservation, let's say, depending on the style of apple or the let's say the variety of apple. So here's the country housewife and family companion, William Ellis, about 1750, and he's writing about preservation of apples, and he says, "Apples gathered ripe, dry, and free of bruising, if they are of the lasting sort, may be preserved almost till apples come again." Now, probably if you grew up in school like I did, you probably learned that the pioneers took apple slices and they put them on strings and, tied them up and they would dry them that way. I haven't found specific references to that yet. Now, I haven't dug for weeks yet, so, it's probably out there somewhere. But they certainly did dry some things on thread in that manner. You can easily find recipes for drying mushrooms in that way. So you can take your mushrooms and string them up on a thread and hang them up in your kitchen and dry your mushrooms for later use. Apple slices, I'm still looking for that one, but it's probably out there somewhere. And they did dry some other things sort of like that, obviously grapes to make raisins and prunes, or plums to make prunes. There's so much to dig in on it. It's a really big question, and certainly different culture groups are going to be doing some of these things a little bit differently. But it's a fun question, and there's a lot there, and a lot of people are interested in preserving. So, did they dehydrate everything like we might do it today? Not necessarily. It probably wasn't as easy as we have it today with our dehydrators, that we can just put the stuff in there and turn it on and off she goes. I really want to thank everyone for all the great questions and the great comments. The comment section on this channel is wonderful. I really want to thank everyone that really makes it a great place to be. Many people are scared to go into the comment section on a YouTube video because they're just crazy. But it takes a good community to hold that comment section together and make it useful and helpful for everyone. So I want to thank you for what you do to help that comment section be useful to everyone. And I want to thank you for all your other kinds of support, either when you're watching our videos or you're sharing our videos especially, and for your direct support of us, whether you support us on Patreon or you support us by purchasing products on our website. All that I am so grateful for. I have a great audience, and I want to thank you for being part of that, and thanks for watching today.